right. Yeah, you're very welcome along. I hope Christmas treated you okay and that you maybe won some money on St. Stephen's Day. Ewan MacKenna is here. How are you?
Pleasure to be here. All good.
This is the 27th of December, so how was your Christmas?
Portly.
Yeah, you're looking well. You've lost a lot of weight.
I have. I took up exercise again after many years in the Sunday Tribune, so
yeah,
helps.
It works, does it?
It does, seemingly, yeah.
Yeah, I must do something about that.
Unlike what Donald Trump says, it does work.
Here, so we have the tweet that is pinned to Ewan's account as a starting point for this conversation. If you're not bitter and angry, you need to get out and meet more people. You decided this is the perfect representation of who you are. Is this who you are just on Twitter, or is this who you are in real life?
I'm more tolerant in real life, I suppose, but it's still who I am. I don't fundamentally like people.
I've lost count of the amount of people who are like, oh, I met Ewan for the first time. He's not like his Twitter persona at all.
People take Twitter very seriously. Far too, and they get insulted very easily.
They do.
But no, I mean, just people say to you...
When you're lashing out the insults like confetti, they get insulted. That happens to be a thing that happens.
Maybe, but I mean, a lot of it is just telling the truth.
Did you feel hamstrung by characters ever? I know it's changed recently, but certainly if you want to get your most impactful point across, you kind of need to get that across pretty sharp and pretty quickly in 140 characters in the old system.
Yeah, but you have to read other people's tweets now as well, and it's just longer, and they're kind of really
through other people.
You know, it doesn't have to fill out.
Absolutely.
We were just waiting to hit record on this piece, and Ewan said to us, James McClean proved that the public should never be allowed to vote for anything. What did you make of James McClean winning the Irish sports personality or person of the year?
Person, I think he is he?
He's person.
Mo Farah's old personality.
Yeah, okay. An important distinction.
Well, I know people didn't vote for him on the basis of his form for West Brom, but I was looking at a stat recently from early December, and I think he's played 15.
All right. Yeah, you're very welcome along. I hope Christmas treated you okay and that you maybe won some money on St. Stephen's Day. Ewan MacKenna is here. How are you?
Pleasure to be here. All good.
This is the 27th of December, so how was your Christmas?
Portly.
Yeah, you're looking well. You've lost a lot of weight.
I have. I took up exercise again after many years in the Sunday Tribune, so yeah, helps.
It works, does it?
It does, seemingly, yeah.
Yeah, I must do something about that.
Unlike what Donald Trump says, it does work.
Here, so we have the tweet that is pinned to Ewan's account as a starting point for this conversation. If you're not bitter and angry, you need to get out and meet more people. You decided this is the perfect representation of who you are. Is this who you are just on Twitter, or is this who you are in real life?
I'm more tolerant in real life, I suppose, but it's still who I am. I don't fundamentally like people.
I've lost count of the amount of people who are like, oh, I met Ewan for the first time. He's not like his Twitter persona at all.
People take Twitter very seriously. Far too, and they get insulted very easily.
They do.
But no, I mean, just people say to you...
When you're lashing out the insults like confetti, they get insulted. That happens to be a thing that happens.
Maybe, but I mean, a lot of it is just telling the truth.
Did you feel hamstrung by characters ever? I know it's changed recently, but certainly if you want to get your most impactful point across, you kind of need to get that across pretty sharp and pretty quickly in 140 characters in the old system.
Yeah, but you have to read other people's tweets now as well, and it's just longer, and they're kind of really
through other people.
You know, it doesn't have to fill out.
Absolutely.
We were just waiting to hit record on this piece, and Ewan said to us, James McClean proved that the public should never be allowed to vote for anything. What did you make of James McClean winning the Irish sports personality or person of the year?
Person, I think he is he?
He's person.
Mo Farah's old personality.
Yeah, okay. An important distinction.
Well, I know people didn't vote for him on the basis of his form for West Brom, but I was looking at a stat recently from early December, and I think he's played 15 Premier League games up to whatever, just before Christmas. No goals, no assists, 3 shots on target all season.
Not a great season for him at West Brom. No, they voted for him because he scored a goal against Wales.
That was pretty much it, and it kind of reminded me but soccer has become all-encompassing. I was over in London there recently, and it's like Nando's on every corner, or Starbucks here in every corner. Everything is Premier League soccer now, and it's almost ruining everything else. It's taken over, and there's too much of it, and it's always at the front of people's minds. Whereas you look at a guy like Ryan Burnett and what he did this year. I mean, here's a guy in a major world sport who has unified world titles. we talk about ourselves as a great boxing nation on the back of one great boxer, maybe once in a generation. We've a load of them right now, and he's the best of any of them this year.
We talked about this just before Christmas and made the point that he's a Nordy, and people in the south don't like Nordies.
Is James McLean not a Nordy?
It's a good point, actually.
Plays for the Republic of Ireland. Identifies very heavily with the Republic of Ireland, which kind of pushes the other thing the other way entirely, where, like, I would actually say that James McLean thing proves the point. That it's like, this guy has turned his back on Northern Ireland, and we as a public hate Northern Ireland, therefore we love James McLean.
Ryan Burnett fought for Ireland in a youth Olympics, I think. I mean, he always wore the green vest. Had it been personality rather than person of the year, it would have made more sense giving it to McLean, because I think he can be quite, in a kind of sanitised soccer world, at least he speaks his mind, and I like that, even though I don't always agree with him.
And the difficulty here is that everybody assumes that you're anti-James McLean if you don't think that he necessarily represents the epitome of all that was great about Irish sport, which that vote is supposed to be about.
Yeah, and this is the problem. People think when you criticise one strand of a person, they make it black and white, as if you're just having a go at him over every aspect of his career and his personality and everything. He just wasn't the best Irish sports person this year, plain and simple.
So Burnett's top of your list?
Burnett was top of my list.
Who? Anybody else in the conversation?
Not really. I mean, people will say Katie Taylor, and how will I phrase this?
The quality of the opposition isn't there for at the minute.
It's not. I mean, it's a niche sport, and it's not her fault that there's nothing out there, but I think if you're going to talk about Katie Taylor, you have to look at the quality of the opposition. I think it's patronising not to. And if you look at the comment section under every Katie Taylor article, I kind of look at it through my fingers. It's our girl, isn't she great? All this sort of stuff. And I find that actually sexist rather than saying, look who she's fighting, this is rubbish.
The pre-Christmas Tenio PSG Sports Index had her as Ireland's most admired sports person again, like miles and miles and miles ahead of everybody, like 20% ahead of the next person.
It's baffling, and I mean, even going back to the Olympics last year, I just found, like, for me, the story was, here was a girl who all the way, her dad in her corner, had come from Bray. He's not there, and no one wanted to talk about that, which was the story of the Olympics, or her story, and people just avoided it.
People's private lives are private, though, at some point as well, right?
Well, it wasn't, but it was relevant to her not performing, that the coach isn't in her corner.
Yeah, and that's fair enough, but I do think there is a point where they can say, that is private business. Sure enough, it has an impact on my performance, and you can all see that, but I'm not going to talk about it.
Maybe, but would we do that with other boxers? Or is it just because it's her and because it's a woman, which again I think we treat her...
Spike O'Sullivan recently fought a couple of weeks back, and I'm amazed that every time Spike O'Sullivan is reported on, that it isn't also reported on that he got arrested for punching his then partner. That would be the only thing that would be relevant to me when I see that name being mentioned in connection with a fight. But I see boxing journalists and people I respect going, oh yeah, good man, this is great. I'm like, well, actually, I don't know. So maybe you're right. Maybe we don't have enough of the backstory for everybody. But there's a balance between, like, stuff that's prurient, and this is a really awkward conversation, because there's definitely times when you feel like, I don't really need to know this element of a personal...
I do. I mean, if for example, if Peter Taylor hadn't been in Katie's corner all along, and if he wasn't such an influence on her sporting career, I would say absolutely, I don't want to know. But for me, it was hugely relevant, especially when you saw her tears.
To know that they've stopped, like they're no longer together, and that's clearly a family issue.
I don't think the impact it had on her performances, though, and that was leading into the Olympics.
So maybe that bit wasn't spoken about. The specifics of whatever happened between them is
no, but I think the story of the coach, her dad, and the kind of not in her corner, I thought that was very moving. I thought it probably added to her tears coming out of her loss there, etc.
And to be honest, I thought she was going to retire after that. Which means that this second act of her career is actually genuinely interesting. It's not at the same level yet as a Roy Keane or a Porrick Harrington or somebody who has reached global status in a global sport, despite the fact she's a world champion. She can only beat what's put in front of her, but they're not putting enough in front of her.
It's not, and it's the pyramid. I mean, I say the same thing about McGregor. I mean, to get to the top of a relatively niche sport like UFC, to get to play championship football in England is probably a greater achievement, given the amount of people in a truly global sport that you're competing against to get to that level. Whereas with her, I remember when she did her homecoming tour after London, for example, she was fighting out in the National Stadium during the senior championships, and she was fighting a girl from Poland. She absolutely beat her up badly. But the Polish girl was in the bar afterwards, and I went up to her and I said, "What's it like to fight with Katie?" And she said, "Well, it would have been better if I hadn't had a week's notice." She'd been in training 4 days in the last 6 months, like, for this. So you're kind of thinking, you know.
And also, like, I mean, we're a weird culture in that we love to sit and gawp at stuff, but I don't know if Kieran Cunningham made this point on Twitter recently. If everybody who voted for her in that survey could go and buy a bloody ticket the next time she fights here, it'll be interesting to see when she fights in Dublin how many tickets they sell, and if the Sky hype machine can actually deliver a sellout crowd in whatever venue they go to, because it's hard to convince people to go and watch boxing. Even Andy Lee struggled to get tickets for the Billy Joe Saunders fight, and it turns out Billy Joe Saunders is an unbelievably good boxer, like genuinely world class, and that would have been a sensational moment in Irish boxing history. But maybe the promotion for that was all wrong, and it definitely seemed like, you know, the backstory to that was chaotic. But
well, Dublin's always been a graveyard for professional boxing. I mean, going back, was it Lennox Lewis and Boat they had to pull it after selling 25 tickets or something for it in the Point. You had Nassim Hamid years back trying to promote his fight here, he was at a punch bag out in Grafton Street, which Bernard Dunn, I suppose, I always found what he did was amazing, because that went against the grain completely.
What was the difference?
I think Brian Peters did incredible work in selling Dunn as kind of, this is Dublin, this is, I mean, he just...
He did the Nassim stuff though, didn't he? Because he
did.
And then stopped. He was like, I can't make this.
But he pumped massive money into it as well. I mean, I don't know, they were kind of break even a lot of those fights, even when selling out the Point, and he turned it into a real show. Like, there was real hype around all of that, which was incredible marketing, but it was costly. But it will be interesting with Katie. It's almost like it's a reflex action when anyone says Katie, she's great. And no one questions any of it any further. Like that poll you say, who's your moment of the year, your person of the year, ask Katie. It's like a reflex in the Irish psyche at this stage.
It's funny too, because none of those fights were on terrestrial TV. So,
no.
Like, I wonder, is it an imagined thing more than anything? I remember the RTE News report the night of the fight was like, this is the one in the midweek fight in London, and it was an exclusively Irish crowd, because there's only 1,000 people at it or whatever, and she was the headline. And there were expats who were there who it meant quite a lot to be able to go and see this thing, and it was a mixed crowd, like a very different crowd from your normal boxing thing. So I definitely think the Katie Taylor story has these amazing elements to it, and I don't know, the 2012 win in the Olympics was genuinely emotional, because it was the fulfillment of a destiny that you thought was never going to be allowed to happen, because she was a boxer in a sport that didn't actually allow women into the Olympics. So there's an amazing stuff there, and maybe it's that residual stuff that we like.
I think her legacy more with women's boxing is going to be kind of the trailblazer, who kind of did drag things along a little bit, rather than we won't be able to look at her and kind of go, she is one of our greatest ever sports people, because the talent wasn't there around her at the time. And she might bring it on in her career, but that might be more her legacy.
And so many great teams actually suffer from the same thing. The Kilkenny hurlers didn't get that much respect because, well, sure, it was only Waterford and they collapsed, and then you didn't actually have a rival, and then when you did have a rival, Tipperary actually beat you in one of those finals. So I think in retrospect we begin to realise, okay, actually they were pretty special. But
it's a weird thing though, you get it with a lot of teams, you get it with the rugby team as well, that this failure to criticise from the public, that is, that something bad happens on the pitch, something dreadful is done, and we're very slow to actually focus in on the errors, who made the mistake, and criticise them straight up. Like, if you actually watched that Taylor fight on Sky Sports, or was it on BT, I can't remember, in York Hall that night, like the commentators were like, this is a really poor performance from Katie Taylor, she's let herself down here in a number of places. They predicted her to win, but the scorecard reflected what the scorecard really should have been, whereas in the end she probably won by a lot more than she really deserved to win by. But then you look at the coverage then the next couple of days, you particularly look at the public discourse, like you mentioned, comment sections and stuff, and it is, Katie, fair play to her, she's defended her title successfully, all that sort of stuff. So maybe it just comes down to blind patriotism.
There's a little bit, I mean, if you go back to the 2012 Olympic win, how many times then or since was it questioned that she may have actually lost that fight?
Pretty regularly, in fairness.
Was it?
Yeah, we definitely talked about, like, she definitely gets the benefit of the doubt against Dodgegeva in that final. Like, in the final round, it looks like she lost that round, and on the scorecard she doesn't.
It was hugely questionable. I mean, I thought she lost that fight, but it was never mentioned when she lost in Rio. It was, has she been done here?
Yeah.
Whereas nobody mentions the flip side, and Irish boxing doesn't mention that around the last Olympics, where we got done in this fight. And we kind of got the benefit in other fights. So in
the past, over the years, definitely. Yeah, I think because she was the poster child for that sport, then it was very unlikely she was going to lose.
And being in London. I think kind of the location of an Olympics can often be important when it comes to.
And I wonder if the crowd helped. You know, like sometimes it's not just corruption. Sometimes it's also the crowd having an impact on the judging. But we got a bit blown off course there. You mentioned the rugby team. One of your highlights of the year was Ireland not getting the Rugby World Cup. Is that fair to say?
And the highlight.
That's number one.
By
Your
a
sporting
distance.
moment of the year.
My sporting moment of the year was the French getting that. And the fact it was the French as well meant we'd no real excuse to go, oh, this has been the World Rugby have kind of want South Africa to have it. Then France got it. Our bid was just crap. It was absolutely right. I mean, you can't. I laugh at these guys. Bulletproof. Is that what Shane Ross called it? Oh, one stadium they put up doesn't even have planning permission. I mean, this World Cup is 5.5 years away, is it? And they've one stadium, one of their major stadiums they put forward is a greenfield site in Belfast that doesn't have planning permission on the verge of Brexit.
I'm sure they said it'll be completed by 2022, so take them at their word, Ewan.
It's nuts. I mean, I think Castlebar, like, you know, kind of, you've stone seats 3/4 of the ground. I don't think we know in this country what it takes to host a major event, how many people come, how busy it gets, how many hotel rooms.
Can I ask you about that, right? Should we not try and learn that? I mean, is the notion of us ever hosting a major event always bullshit?
Yeah.
But it's not really.
We don't have the room, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the stadia, we don't have the public transport, and then there's the moral factor. If we've any sense, you don't host the major events in a country like this because it's morally bankrupt. People always say it would lose, all these events lose money. What you had was a government guaranteeing or basically backing a private event with massive amounts of public money, saying even if you lose it, you can have that. That's what we did with the banks.
We did, to a much greater degree, and because I don't think that the two situations are as parallel as you've painted it. The issue with a major event is that there is some sense of national coming together, which you pay for. Now, whether or not everybody gets behind the Rugby World Cup, or everybody gets behind the America's Cup, or whatever other global sporting event there is, it's possible to have. I don't know what Henry Shefflin's doing there, his part of the bid, but he managed to go around Croke Park and that didn't seem to do the trick for the judges either. But there is, at some point, there's a cost that you pay, and the benefit is we feel good about ourselves. And as a country and as a society, try and bring people together. That's not something that you can write down and go, I mean, they tried to write that down and it was crack and it didn't really work for them. But
see, I think that's the bullshit the elite class tries to sell us while making money out of this, while transferring public money into the best placed private hands and saying, but you'll all have a great time, and walking away with bundles of money. There
is a point in actually trying to bring society together around sport. Like, that's why we fund participation in sport in the first place. And this is like a giant party of it, and you try not to lose money, and you try and put the right systems in place to make sure that you don't, like, so what private hands would ultimately have benefited from us doing the World Cup bid? Some building companies and
best
some construction
placed building companies, best placed hoteliers, best placed publicans, people who are doing well in society already.
But aren't they actually just people who are business people in your country? And
they are.
And don't they all employ vast amounts of people who ultimately are the working class and the blue collar workers who, let's face it, we need some infrastructure projects to try and get those jobs created into the future.
But it's the myth of trickle-down economics that is just, in a nutshell, it's everybody pays, we'll make a load, you'll get a little. Which is very dodgy morally. And in a country, when you have a country that has finite amounts of money, you have to prioritise things.
Look, when the homelessness crisis has been so chronically mismanaged by this current government, to see them spending their time and effort and energy on trying to win a tournament, I would agree with you. I do think that there are lessons to be learned. And actually, I think there is a long-term benefit to hosting stuff and to having events over here. Like, so the American football game came over, and whatever amount of money that cost, maybe £2 million. Dublin was great for a weekend. A bunch of people come over and experience Ireland and travel around the place, and there's a tourism boon along the Wild Atlantic Way. Like, the Wild Atlantic Way was pilloried as being complete bullshit, but actually it has created loads of jobs for small, not just the big hoteliers and not just the big publicans right across the western seaboard. And some of this stuff, you don't know what's going to happen out of it. Some of it actually just does genuinely lead to a better sense of who we are and a more clearly identified plan and structure around these events.
One of the tourism boom I've heard, I mean, would there be? You would get some people coming, but none of these figures, and I always get very sceptical when I see kind of Deloitte or Ernst & Young do these reports, and economists purposely mismanage figures in these reports. Why is that?
Who's paying them for the reports, you know?
Well, exactly. So if you want to use public money to do this, at least be honest with us. I asked the Department of Sport, I asked the Department of Finance all along, can we get a breakdown of these figures? No, commercial confidentiality. Why is there commercial confidentiality over public money?
There shouldn't be.
Which suggests to me they're up to something.
Here's the thing, right? So I would say that there is a price that you can pay to do it, and that you accept that there is going to be certain aspects of it that will be a learning experience, and maybe you don't ever get to do it again. You think that there's no euros ever that's worth investing in hosting a major event?
Not in a country of this size with this infrastructure. If the infrastructure is developed not specifically for a tournament, if it's developed for the people in that country, if the stadia happen to be built, but if you're building them for a one-off and there's no use for them down the line.
Well, we've no use for half the stadiums that we already have.
We don't, so why pump another $500 million?
There would be use for these stadiums that would have been built for the World Cup, wouldn't there?
Would there? What, a county final in Mayo, they need another 20,000 seats on the other side of the stand? I don't think there is.
But that would have been a temporary solution, wouldn't it, the issue of seating? I'm not actually quite sure what they would have done to resolve the seating.
I think the issue more about the public transport is actually worth teasing out. So if we have to build a bunch of good public transport to host an event, I say, you know what, if this is the cost-benefit analysis here, into the long run we actually get this amazing public transport system that's fit for purpose, then happy days. If that also...
I don't think they were going to do that, though. It's just going to be stick on, we'll pay for a few more buses for 5 weeks and then go back to reality.
As you say, there are some issues with the bid that we had.
I'm just interested, where's our graph in terms of sporting events that we could host that lead to a positive outcome? So Ger mentions the weekend that all the American football fans come over. What was it again? It was Army versus Notre Dame or whatever. I don't know.
State have been over a bunch of teams, yeah.
But anyways, is that like as high as we should go? Do you think that hosting a couple of games of the Euros in football is where we go? Obviously, the Rugby World Cup is far too high in your view. Like, how high can we go in terms of these that are beneficial to the country?
I think kind of the smaller stuff is fine. I've often said, like, why can't we host a tennis tournament in the Three Arena, or why can't you put a running track around Croke Park and host a Golden League meet where 20,000 people come in, doesn't cost a lot, the city gets a boost, but there's no real infrastructure to be put in. Everything's in place for that smaller stuff, and that's fine. But we don't do that. We kind of go for, we want an Olympics and a Rugby World Cup.
Well, everybody wants to plant a flag at the top of a mountain.
Yeah.
I think a slice of the Euro 2020 pie is quite shrewd.
It is, it'll be interesting, but how you benefit from these, people have to have a good time to want to come back to actually benefit from it. And I don't know if you're paying like hotel rooms right now in Dublin and there's no major event on, I think they're on at 93% capacity. There's a chronic shortage, the Hoteliers Federation. So you're paying a fortune. You go down and you have a €7 pint down in Temple Bar.
Well, don't go to Temple Bar.
That's what they do.
Go down Fleet Street and have one for a $5.
Well, I was in Mulligan's the other night, $5.90 a pint.
There you go. Well, that's just everywhere now.
Yeah.
What is it in Anderson's?
$4.80.
Is it?
That might be a free one, John.
All right, so you mentioned Conor McGregor a little bit earlier on. Obviously, Conor McGregor's dreams came true this year. He became richer than Croesus. And looking back, you wrote a piece that was... I would say not sympathetic, but like certainly you had high hopes for Conor McGregor. The first feature piece that you wrote with him, there's it's good detail in that piece. You sat with him in a fast food restaurant, I think somewhere in the
McDonald's on the Long Mile Road.
Yeah. And at that point, you thought it looked like that he was somebody who had a bright future and who could actually be in a leadership role. Is that too much? Is that like?
Maybe. I thought there was a warmth to him and a warmth to his potential story. I actually didn't think he'd get as far as he did in terms of the sporting side of it, but I didn't think he'd fall as far as he did in terms of the human side of it. Interesting guy, really good to talk about kind of the different elements of the fight game, of Muay Thai, of Capoeira, of all these different aspects to it. And really positive. I mean, his stuff on positive energy, which I wouldn't believe a lot in, but to hear him and really believe it, and to see this guy who... plumber's apprentice, didn't like it, threw it in even though his father told him not to, and just gave up everything to give this thing a go. And to see a guy who went for a job in Boyle Sports, they said no, and then they want to sponsor him. To see a guy who was in a dole queue thinking get 60 grand for fight of the night in UFC in Stockholm, and just this is the world to him, this little bit of money, and on the way up, and he's living his dream.
Is that when you meet him? It's after the 60 Gs.
That was it, yeah. I think he was on the Late Later at that time as well for the first time. And just to see a guy living his dream, and it wasn't about the money, even though 60 grand did mean the world to him. And to see him call his girlfriend then and try and get a lift home afterwards, and she shows up in a banged up Peugeot, and just there was a warmth about a guy. Just really, you could only admire a guy who kind of, he gave up everything to just give this one big go, and he did it. And that's a great story. And then, but what you do, that's part of the journey. That shouldn't be the destination. You get to the top, and what happens? What we have, I mean, I was saying the other night, like, it's... Remember the three Elvises in Father Ted? He's kind of reached the Father Jack phase of that now, you know. And it's grim, like, you can just see him with a belly eating a cheeseburger, like. And joking aside, someone needs to pull him aside and say, look, man, hold it together here, because this mightn't end well. Sport isn't littered with people who reach the top being taken aside by somebody they trust, though. It's not, and especially in the fight game. Worse, he's surrounded by a lot of people who have made millions off the back of him, who kind of just, that's great. And I mean, I'm always amazed John Kavanagh has never stood in and said something to him. Even in terms of that, I think Kavanagh did, actually, after the first Diaz fight. They'd kind of had a bit of they hadn't spoken in ages, and they kind of weren't communicating, and then they had a bit of a clear the air, and then they got it back together. And so did he about his lifestyle, though? Because Kavanagh's head of this new Mixed Martial Arts Federation of Ireland, or whatever it's called. And I looked at the silence after that Bellator event here in Dublin, where McGregor, who was a fan, therefore he's not allowed to have access to the ring, he's the same as anyone who goes along, jumps in the ring, attacks the referee, gets pulled back out of the ring, tries to climb back in, slaps an official in the face, runs around the ring or octagon or whatever it's called like a madman, wasn't arrested. So I look at the Loud fans who did that back in 2010. Were they arrested? They were, and 3 of them ended up in court. Okay, I didn't realise that. So wasn't he suspended by the UFC, though? Wasn't that the off-book suspension that nobody actually knows about? He was, but where was the MMA Federation of Ireland? This was in their jurisdiction, and this is a group that's looking for, especially after the Portuguese guy who passed away, this is a group that's looking to promote the sport here and show that we're in control of this. This is organised properly here. State funding. Yeah. Yet this is allowed to happen. I mean, if you did that in a bar, it would be the equivalent of a guy going in behind, hitting a barman, then slapping a bouncer on his way out of a bar. That's what he did. He was a fan. He had no ring privileges. Yet nothing happened other than a kind of the quiet UFC ban, if that's what it is. Apparently they took him off the card in a couple of days' time, which he had not been announced for anyway. So I don't know. I think that's a fair point that he's clearly bigger than the entire sport in Ireland, and so therefore there are no repercussions from him and from that group for whenever he steps out of line, because ultimately they feel like that would be killing the goose that laid the golden egg. A bit of that, and that's fine in terms of sport, but I look at him and I see his carry on, and I worry about him beyond sport. I just think that, what does he do anymore? Is he even? When was the last time he fought? Other than that freak show at Mayweather, which was sport. It was 2016. So, clearly, here's the thing: if you have 130 million quid, or you had at one point 130 million quid, how do you get the motivation to go back and fight again and to take that punishment that you know is coming? Maybe you do it once and you realise you don't need to do it again. And in the fight game, absolutely, more so than other sports as well, because it's not a natural thing you really want to do, to kind of get into a ring and get your head kicked in. He surely has some sort of competitive ambition. I think he might have achieved that, but I think the key for him is to find something productive he likes to do, because the way they always tell lotto winners, they say don't quit your job straight away, or find something to do. Yeah. Because otherwise you just end up in a bar or whatever else, constantly partying, and that's not a good way to go. I mean, it sounds all right to me. But for a few weeks. Well, maybe a couple of years.
To McGregor, I'd say it sounds great, because he strikes me as the type of guy who really enjoys the idea of chaos. Like him getting into his car in his tracksuit out of court. He seemed to be really enjoying that. He's this kind of spiral that his life has entered into. McGregor seems enthralled by that. Up until the point where it becomes dangerous. But that only lasts so long, I think. I mean, I think when chaos becomes habit, then you stop enjoying it, but because it's habit, you're living chaos without enjoying it. That's a very slippery slope to get into. I mean, you can't enjoy that constant chaos if no structure. If you were the person who was in the inner circle and you were to take him aside, what would you actually say to him? That he needs, that you can't keep living like this, that you put in all this work to reach this point and you've made your money, but you're just going to throw your life away with this. Just find something to do. You should go to Hollywood and be an actor or something. Just do something that gives them... Everyone needs structure in their life. You need stuff to do. You can't just have nothing to do every day. Or Vegas. Here's the thing, right? Call it a farce, call it whatever you want.
he could easily fight another super fight against somebody on the back of the Mayweather fight. He could equally easily try and convince Mayweather to get into the octagon. Mayweather's obviously flirting with the idea and has been. He's like, oh no, I'm not going to do it. But clearly he's fluttering that one up the flagpole to see how it sails. And it would sail, right? So there's loads more money on the table for him to do some of these, which are far less risky now that he has all that money in the bank. Like, get that structure. Go back to doing some of that stuff.
He doesn't look to me like a guy who wants to get back into training. And even the Mayweather fight before, remember all this rubbish we were sold about, oh, he's never been in better shape. Mayweather just walked around the ring for three rounds, not throwing a punch, and McGregor could barely breathe.
The conditioning wasn't great, all right.
Does he not love mixed martial arts?
No, I think he loves fame and money. I think that was just a vehicle to get him there.
Really, but like, I can't imagine.
I think there's a bit of both. I think he loves the mixed martial arts, and that actually.
Or did love.
Certainly, I think that, like, you know, you look back at that those boards.ie posts and that video, and like he's still a spotty teenager. I think he definitely was in love with the sport and the definition that it gave to who he wanted to be and what he wanted to achieve. I think that's the type of thing. Like, that's the structure and process that you're talking about is missing from his life at the moment. And I'd say he definitely loved that. But you can't do that. Sacrifice in hours and get to that level, regardless of whether or not it's a niche sport. You can't dedicate yourself to something like that without actually either enjoying the pain in a Kieran McGeeney loving pain style way, or actually just loving it.
It's a strange one, fight sports though, because a lot of guys hang around too long, and yet here we're talking about a guy who got out too early, maybe. And maybe there never is a good time to get out of it. And if you go back through boxing history even, it's weird. It's the guys who make it to the top, it's the champions who usually fall off the cliff. The guys who lose the title fight tend to do all right after it.
Yeah.
But I always thought, regardless of the result, Mayweather was always going to beat him. I did look at that coming up to it, and I thought he's going to make 100 million. And it's a weird thing to say when you see a guy working his ass off from nothing to get 100 million or whatever it was, 130 million for one fight, and to think this is not going to be good for him.
The only reason we know it's 130 million is because that's the figure he told the judge. I never saw the published pay-per-views for that fight, which is always a little bit funny.
Yeah, I didn't see them either.
Yeah.
It was a lot of money anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure he did all right. The last thing we have to talk about is Dublin. We have the most anti-Dublin biased person in the world with us. It would be rude not to ask you about why you hate the Dubs so much, Ewan.
I love them. I think they're a great team, a great coach, charismatic guy. Came from nothing, no money. I was laughing actually that they released at their Dublin County Board feed. They fundraised €54,000 this year. And I looked at that and I thought, these lads had a breakfast before the All-Ireland where a seat was $2,500.
Wasn't $2,500 a seat?
What wasn't it? Was a table was 25 or something? Whatever it was. There's no way they fundraised $54,000 this year. Absolutely no way.
I think it was $2,500 for table 10, was it? Yeah.
Was that what it was?
I think so, yeah. So is that figure, like, is it potentially a net figure what they made from that breakfast, as opposed to...
No, they said their 2017 fundraising.
Yeah, so is that so... Yeah, fair enough. So I think that might that have been the only fundraiser they did.
Maybe it might have been the only thing they needed to do.
Exactly,
because they made 1.6 million elsewhere.
Yeah.
I look. They are a great team. No one's ever denying this. And when Dublin fans completely miss the point, it's centre of the universe syndrome. They think, oh, everyone's having a go at us. No one's having a go at them. They've done nothing wrong. They've done too much too well. It's the GAA everyone has a problem with. It's the GAA who threw money at them year on year on year. A county with more than a province, given more money than any province, with the ability to earn sponsorship from their market greater than the sum of any province.
Now, so that came afterwards. I think that, like, the issue here is that they financially doped the region because it needed to. As an organisation, it needed a really strong Dublin, and then it didn't say, by the way, once you get your house in order, you're going to have to run this yourself, which would have been a legitimate thing to do, because they do have the ability to generate 1.6 million in revenue from sponsorship, but they didn't when they were a shambles 10, 15 years ago. Now they're not a shambles, they're brilliantly run. They've got a brilliant chief executive. Mossy's doing an absolutely amazing job, and I think fair play to them. It's the central GAA need to now say, okay, we need to start seeing you being a net contributor to the rest of the country, and that's how this is going to roll out here, as opposed to it's our money.
They don't have the guts to. Remember that committee where Pádraig Duffy and Philip Brown and was John Delaney up before it as well?
Yeah.
One day.
Yeah.
Like, they asked, one of the questions to Duffy was about Dublin funding, and he said, oh, we'll try and cut it. We'll see if that's okay with Dublin. And it's like Dublin have outgrown the GAA at this stage. Dublin are calling the shots. And what the other effect this is having is killing the game around Dublin. People always say, oh, well, Dublin have a great choice of sports. Everywhere is a great choice of sports now, which is a great thing. But if you're an elite athlete in Kildare or Laois or Meath or Longford, if you're a brilliant 14-year-old, you can play rugby or you can play GAA. Why are you going to play GAA? If you're good enough to play inter-county, why are you going to pick the sport that's going to humiliate you if you make it to the top?
So, I would actually tend to agree with most of the stuff, particularly around the competitive advantage, that there's no long-term fix to Dublin's advantage now that they've got good at harvesting the best teenagers and showing them a clear pathway and keeping the squad regenerating. Like, the best thing that could happen for the rest of the football championship is, and we've said this before, is that the Dublin hurlers get really good and some of the best footballers actually end up playing hurling. That'll weaken them a little bit.
That's the Colin O'Rourke theory, though, isn't it? It's
not
like
much.
The whole idea of focusing in on this small cohort of players, as in his point is that the Dublin B team should be allowed to play inter-county football, therefore we need to split Dublin in two, which I think is a little bit of a ridiculous argument because, as I say, you're only supplementing 30 extra players. But, like, do you buy the argument at all, and I know it's a very simplistic one, that this is just an unbelievably great generation of players, because something is happening between underage and senior level, because you look at the minor output from Dublin over the last couple of years. Even I know they're under 21 champions, but they haven't been as earth-shatteringly dominant as they have been at senior level in the Leinster Championship. Like, some of this is down to just a golden generation of footballers.
I heard that before, though. I heard that with the Bernard Brogan, Alan Brogan generation. Now you look, you've Conor Callaghan, Cormac Costello, Paul Mannion, Fenton in the middle. This is a completely new team than the first one that won the All-Ireland. And they mightn't be winning at underage, but underage is hard. Like, it's the development that takes place at underage rather than the winning. Like, for years, Cork were hammering Kerry at underage. Now, I know Kerry have won the last few minor All-Irelands, but Cork were hammering them because Kerry were focused on skilled players, and Cork were throwing out kind of 6'4", 18-year-olds with beards and just wiping them off the pitch. So it's not just the winning at underage, but it's a numbers game. I mean, there's a couple of things. You have the population, so you're going to get a better quality of player because you have more players. Then you have the numbers of coaches, you have the money in coaching that's pumped into it. And I don't buy this idea, money doesn't make better players. Tell that to every professional sports team in the world who spend millions on coaching. That's absolute nonsense.
So what's the fix, right?
I'm not sure there is one anymore. I think it may have gone too far. I've been harping on about this for a decade, because for me it wasn't even ever about Dublin winning. If Dublin had won nothing for the last 20 years, it's still unreasonable that a governing body in a sport backs one team. I find that really odd. Imagine the Premier League basically said Manchester City can play all their games at home and get 4 points for a win.
The difficulty the GAA has is it's not actually backing the team. Ultimately, the team benefits from it. They're backing the clubs and the participation. And the clubs are doing this great job with 200 kids, like under 10, under 12, under 14, and that has to be the meat and drink of the actual organisation, is to get people into clubs to participate. The corollary of that is then that this super team emerges, and that has the ability to raise all the money. So it's hard to divorce that we need to get people participating, which automatically has this...
I agree. It is a conflict of interest, though, because it would be like the FA running, with why the Premier League runs the Premier League and the FA runs kind of underage soccer.
Well, the only way you could fix it is if you take it over and actually make sure that some of the money that gets pumped out from the senior inter-county team gets equally distributed amongst the other Leinster counties, maybe, or something.
Well, the figures are what, from 2010 to 2014 in terms of games development money per player. Kerry, I think, were at €20 per player, Tyrone 21, Mayo were at 19, and Dublin were at €238 per player over those 5 years.
And is that coming from Central Council?
That's Central Council.
And the government? Or
no, the government money was separate. They got $5 million between 2004 and 2009 from basically a Bertie Ahern slush fund.
Yeah.
That's so they had that first. Then they had the GAA pumping all this money in, which was like 1.5 million a year to Dublin, whereas other counties were getting 44,000. So it wasn't even per population; it was per player. They were still absolutely lavishing Dublin hugely.
The only potential positive is that the money works, and you can make this case now and get 4 or 5 other counties up to that level of investment. But ultimately, that's not really what the point of this is.
I was working it out to get every other county up to what Dublin have been getting. I think the GAA would have to come up with 96 million.
Yeah,
just an extra in a game. So that's not going to happen. But they haven't put money like. You look at hurling development in Dublin, that 1 million a year, a lot of it was from the taxpayer, was supposedly for that. But like, there's urban area, Naas, Portlaoise, hurling areas, they can't get a penny. Like, there's big urban areas outside Dublin that cannot get a penny, and the game is dying there now, and there's absolutely no interest in it. No interest from the GAA, and kind of saying, nah.
So is that the biggest challenge for the next Director General to
somehow
make Dublin
not
less?
even. I mean, I would say the club issue. I can see clubs striking. I genuinely can see clubs striking in the next couple of years. They're being treated so badly. We
heard a bit of that from Clare, where I'm just trying to remember now the exact specifics of the situation. We were talking about this when John Green was in, and after the Clare League was on, one of the club managers came out and said, I think it might have been Kilmurray Bricken, came out and said, we're not going to make our players available for the county team if the situation isn't fixed. I was like, well, that's a pretty interesting development. And if that starts happening and the players agree to it, then suddenly the power base shifts back towards the clubs again.
It needs to. It reminds me a bit of it's like the Catholic Church at the minute, where kind of the collection plate goes out to the poorest people who are expected to hand cash over to the priest for a steak dinner. And that's what's happening. I mean, the stories you hear, like the club championship this year, there was one reserve goalkeeper for a county team who plays outfield for his club. The county manager rang that club manager before the game and said he's playing in goals. I mean, just this dictate. It's the same with development squads at underage, like from county development squads. Lads aren't allowed to play with their mates anymore. They're on gym programmes at this time of the year rather than being allowed from September on, rather than allowed to be playing club football. You see with the Club Players Association, I think only one of their motions got to Congress recently that I think you can track delegates who voted for what. Yeah. But the rest of them were fired out. And people will say, oh, but it's a democracy, sure, they can do this, they can get people. It's not really a democracy. Anyone who's at Congress knows that it's politics, and politics isn't as simple as a democracy. It's lads looking after themselves, doing favours behind the scenes. And then if it is a democracy, stuff like the Sky Sports deal didn't even go to Congress. So it's not really, and they're just being trampled on. They're being absolutely trampled on to fund the 1%, and the money like the GPA are getting at the minute is it's going to be $6.5 million a year or something. They're going to
don't the GPA earn that money? Don't the players actually generate the income? Didn't all the Sky money only come because those players?
It has to be a two-way street, I think. That's is the key, and it's not that at the minute. I mean, so the GPA who represent 1% of the players, fair enough, they earn a lot of it, get $6.5 million a year. The CPA with 20,000 members. I was talking to Michael Briody, their president, the other week, and he was saying the GA won't even meet with them. They wouldn't meet with them one week because Coldplay were in town. They're just kind of laughed at constantly.
Well, no, so that's an organisation that needs to just prove its bona fides over a period of time, and the 20,000 membership, that needs to be independently audited to make sure it's true, because they've said it's true. What does that actually mean? Are people paying to join? Is there,
No, they've absolutely no bank account even. They don't take money from anywhere.
Grand, but you kind of need all that stuff to actually be a proper organisation in some ways.
They do. If they start taking money, their argument would always be though that it becomes about that.
Grand, well maybe don't take money, but like have some kind of official registration and a database that's protected. Like, so just, I would agree that most of the stuff that they've said should be adopted. I think everybody actually sees the benefit of having an organisation like that, and they should be helped to become a proper organisation.
Yeah, they are nascent and it will take time, but I think they could do good things. But even Micheál talked to me about the nuclear option, which I found interesting. I said, if the GA don't give you anything, I said, what's the nuclear option? And it was kind of hinted at again that something big could come down the track.
Strikes.
You talk about,
The thing with the strikes though, and like this power shift that you mentioned about club players just like downing tools and striking, like that's just not going to happen. Like we've spoken about how the Dublin situation and the finances are unfixable at this point. It's gone too far. The power has completely shifted to the county player at this point. That has surely gone way too far as well, that the power shift is not going to go back to the club player when it comes to the high profile, because you need the county players striking for their clubs and it to be en masse. If it's club players who aren't playing for county and the county games still go ahead, then a strike will just look ridiculous.
But the one saviour in that, I would suggest, is that a lot of county players still love their clubs, probably.
Of course they do.
Their county, which might shift it back down the line. They might go, well, we actually agree with the club players.
Yeah.
And they might turn around and say that.
But how likely is that really?
I don't know. I mean, I look at a lot of club players just being fed up. I mean, like the Waterford County Football final was played, was it last week or the week before? It's the end of December. Like Moorfield and Lomans was the week before Christmas.
I know, and the quality of the ground is crap, and you're looking at these hurling matches in the club championship and you're thinking this would be a brilliant game in high summer.
And then I look at the ruse of April. Well, that's only for club games, and county managers are now organising overseas trips for a fortnight and stuff during that.
Or maybe not. Maybe that might have been misreported at the time. I'm sure somebody will try and sort that out. Is it maybe possible that actually the right thing here is a split, and that there is this professional organisation with 10 or 12 teams that produces high quality Gaelic football, and that the rest of the organisation understands that it is entirely about participation, improving our skills, being part of the social fabric, and that these two things just can't live together anymore in 2017. You can't have an inter-county game with one team with 1.6 million in commercials and everybody else getting about 150 or maybe 50 grand in some cases in sponsorship.
There is an argument there, but I suppose what counties outside of Dublin will then say is, after all this money, for example, has been pumped into Dublin, the claim that this is okay was because of participation numbers, and then you want to cut that and have 10 elite teams, so there's 22 less counties playing. So you've basically pumped all the money into Dublin to grow the game and get greater participation, and now you're saying, well, elite participation is actually for fewer still again. And when Dublin people, when you talk about splitting Dublin...
But I think if the game goes professional, the county system, just, you don't have that anymore.
I don't think there's the money in Ireland or the population for it to go fully professional. Not that it's amateur strictly now either. I mean, that goes to me. It's semi-pro as it is.
Exactly, yeah. So, we should just be honest. I know it's never going to happen, but, maybe it will happen. Maybe there is a split where the clubs go on strike and decide that and maybe it's the other way. Maybe the GAA is the organisation that's left with this nothing but the elite, and the amateur stuff is actually broken off into some...
It's a very awkward one, though, because with clubs feeding, I mean, who creates the county player ultimately is the club.
Yeah.
It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And worse, the leadership hasn't been there to... never mind kind of trying to stop or sort out this mess. Their attitude and their actions have made it worse over the last decade.
So you're positive about Happy Christmas.
Well, that was in that survey. It was the thing that people are most looking forward to next year. It's the 2018 GAA Championship.
It's because we didn't make the World Cup, though. That's why. What are you positive about?
I don't think that's negative. Which, people, I don't think calling stuff as it is negative. I think it's a wonderful positive. People say we're very negative about the Rugby World Cup not coming to Ireland.
No, you're very positive about that, in fairness. But
I think
just
saving money for homeless people or whatever is a positive thing.
I can see that. I think you are definitely positive about that. But just the future of the GAA, there's a lot of people very negative about the future of the GAA and the prospects of the organisation sustaining a competitive championship, a meaningful programme of games for the club player, and then, more importantly, clubs that are still part of the social fabric of the communities they represent.
I think that the appointment of the next Director General will be one of the stories of next year, even if we don't realise it, that if it's still corporate Croke Park after this next appointment for however many more years, then you're in a real bind. It has to come back now before it goes too far. So that's one to really watch out for. I think that, it won't be as entertaining as the World Cup or whatever else, but in terms of the future of the GAA, it's probably one of their most important appointments.
All right, Ewan, good stuff. Thanks very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Welcome to our new studio, by the way.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. I'm going to steal some of this stuff.
those rugby bits there from the Lions store. I know you love the Lions. Right, that's your lot today. We'll see you again in a couple of days' time. Thanks very much.